If no one comes back for me, then I will sing until the river remembers my name." Clara Whitmore sat alone beside the cold black water with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her sightless eyes turned toward a sky she could not see. The night air smelled of wet stone, pine needles, and distant rain, and every sound seemed too large around her. The river sliding over rocks, the wind pressing through the reeds, the fading echo of carriage wheels that had already vanished into the woods. They had left her there. She knew it with the calm, sinking certainty that comes when hope stops arguing with the truth. The mud still held the marks where the carriage had turned around, but Clara could not see them. She only knew the sound had gone west instead of waiting, and no voice had called her name from the dark. Her white dress, the old one Evelyn had said would be pretty enough from a distance, clung damply to her knees. The fabric was too thin for the river wind. Her fingers were cold, but she kept them still because shaking made the fear feel closer. Willow Creek Pack was less than 3 miles away, yet it might as well have been another world. Tonight the pack house would be glowing with lanterns. Music would spill across the yard. Every unmated wolf would stand straight, polished, smiling, hoping to be noticed by the northern delegation. Clara had heard the girls laughing that morning as they brushed one another's hair and practiced graceful greetings. She had heard Mason Reed's voice too, low and irritated, saying a blind Omega would turn a royal visit into a joke. No one had disagreed loudly enough for it to matter. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and destiny, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love finds the broken. Now, back to Clara. She drew one slow breath and listened. There were no footsteps nearby, no lantern chains, no familiar heartbeat approaching through the trees. Only the river, patient and endless, running as if nothing cruel had happened beside it. Clara pressed her palm to the grass, measuring the distance from the slope by touch. The ground dipped a few feet ahead, slick with moss. Too close, she thought. Evelyn had guided her to this exact place with a gentle hand and a voice sweet enough to hide the lie inside it. "You can hear the festival music from here," Evelyn had promised. No crowds, no whispers, just peace. Then the carriage door had closed. Then the wheels had turned. Then Clara had understood. A blind Omega could not embarrass them if no one could find her. For a moment, sorrow rose so sharply that she bent beneath it. But Clara had learned long ago that crying in front of empty air gave the world nothing back. So she did the only thing that had ever kept her whole. She began to sing. The song was soft at first, barely more than breath, an old lullaby her mother had once hummed while brushing Clara's hair by the kitchen fire. It had no grand words, no polished performance, nothing fit for a royal hall. It was simple and aching and warm, a small flame cupped between two cold hands. Her voice drifted over the river, carrying through mist and pine, crossing the dark where no one from Willow Creek had cared to follow. Clara did not know that a mile upstream, black horses had stopped on the road. She did not know that 6 northern guards had fallen silent at once. And she did not know that King Nathaniel Frost, the Alpha King of the North, had turned his silver eyes toward the river because, for the first time in years, something gentle had reached the wolf inside him and made it listen. The song had almost faded into the river when Clara heard the first change in the night. It was not a voice, not a shout from Willow Creek, not the rattle of Evelyn's carriage returning with an apology she would not have believed anyway. It was a pause, the kind of silence that happens when the forest notices something larger than itself moving through the trees. Clara stopped singing and turned her head slightly, listening with the careful stillness she had learned as a child. A horse exhaled somewhere beyond the reeds. Leather creaked. Snow-soft dirt pressed beneath a measured boot. Whoever approached did not stumble, did not rush, did not whisper nervously to companions. He came alone, and yet the air around him felt crowded with authority. Clara's fingers tightened in the grass. "Who is there?" she asked, keeping her voice even though her heart had begun to beat too quickly. The footsteps stopped several yards away, far enough not to crowd her, close enough that she could hear the quiet discipline in the man's breathing. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, and colder than the river wind, but not unkind. "You are too close to the water." Clara swallowed. Most people began with questions about her eyes, her rank, or why she was alone. This stranger began with the danger at her feet. She moved one hand across the ground, feeling the slick slope beneath her palm, and realized the river was nearer than she had guessed. "I know," she said, though they both understood she had not known enough. The man took one slow step closer, then stopped again. "May I guide you back from the edge?" The question unsettled her more than a command would have. In Willow Creek, people took her elbow without asking, pulled her through doorways, placed her in corners, moved her like furniture that breathed. This stranger asked as if her answer mattered. Clara lifted her chin toward the sound of him. "Tell me your name first." A faint pause. Not hesitation exactly. More like a door closing gently over something too large to reveal. "Nathaniel," he said. "My name is Nathaniel." She heard no packed title, no proud announcement, no expectation that she should bow. Just a name offered into the dark. Clara let out a breath she had been holding. "I am Clara. I know." The words were soft, but they struck her strangely. She had not told him her name. Before fear could rise fully, he added, "You sang it into the song." Her throat tightened. Her mother's lullaby carried her name in the final line, a private tenderness no one in Willow Creek remembered. "You heard that?" Every note. Something in his voice changed on the last word, a careful warmth beneath iron restraint. Clara tried to picture him and found only impressions, tall from the angle of his voice, still from the absence of restless movement, powerful from the way even the river seemed quieter near him. "Were you with the northern delegation?" she asked. Another pause. "Yes." The truth sat between them, incomplete but solid. Clara turned her face away. Shame moved through her before she could stop it. Of all people to find her abandoned in the dark, it had to be someone from the north. Someone who would carry the story back to rooms full of polished strangers. "Then you should return to the festival," she said. "They will be waiting for you." "They can wait." He said it simply, as if kings, councils, ceremonies, and proud pacts were all less urgent than one woman sitting too near a river. Clara had no defense against that kind of gentleness. The wind lifted, brushing damp hair against her cheek. She shivered once, and immediately heard fabric shift. "I have a cloak," Nathaniel said. "I will not place it on you unless you agree." Clara closed her eyes, though darkness did not change. She thought of Evelyn's sweet lie, Mason's embarrassment, every hand that had guided her only to control where she could stand. Then she thought of this stranger stopping several feet away, asking instead of taking, listening instead of judging. "All right," she whispered. The cloak settled over her shoulders a moment later, heavy, warm, carrying the scent of pine, winter air, and distant smoke. Nathaniel's hands never lingered. He stepped back at once, giving her space as if space itself were a form of respect. Clara gathered the cloak around herself, and for the first time since the carriage left, the cold did not feel endless. "Can you stand?" he asked. "Yes." But when she tried, the numbness in her legs made her sway. His hand appeared near hers, not touching, just waiting. Clara found it by sound and instinct, her fingers brushing leather first, then warmth beneath. The moment she accepted his help, the wolf inside her, the quiet, fragile thing she had always been told was too weak to matter, lifted its head as if it had heard the song answer back. Nathaniel guided Clara away from the river with a patience that made every step feel less like rescue and more like permission to exist. His hand remained steady beneath hers, never tightening, never pulling, only offering a point of warmth in the dark. The ground rose slowly from the muddy bank to firmer earth, and Clara counted each change through the soles of her shoes. Wet grass, loose gravel, pine needles, the first hard line of the old river road. Her legs still trembled from the cold, but she refused to lean too heavily on him. Pride was one of the few things Willow Creek had not managed to take from her. Behind them, the river kept moving, smooth and indifferent, carrying her song downstream toward places that had never heard her name. "How far is your pack house?" Nathaniel asked. "A little under 3 miles, Clara said. "The south road curves around the mill, then rises past the cedar gate. You know the road well." "I know the sounds of it." She gave a small, careful smile. "The mill wheel clicks when the water is low. The cedar gate has one loose chain. The kitchen yard always smells like wood smoke and onions after sunset." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "You see more than they do." Clara almost stopped walking. No one had ever said it that way. People told her she managed well, or that she was brave for trying, or that it was a shame the moon had given her such a gentle face and no sight to match it. Compliments that sounded soft until they landed like pity. But Nathaniel's words held no pity. They sounded like an observation made by a man who did not waste language. The warmth beneath the cloak spread slowly through her shoulders. "They do not think so," she said. "They think I hear too much and understand too little." And tonight, Clara turned her face toward the dark road ahead, where festival music drifted faintly through the trees, thin and bright and far away. "Tonight they thought if they placed me somewhere quiet, I would become quiet too." Nathaniel's hand went still beneath hers for half a breath. She felt the change before she heard it, a controlled tightening in the air around him. "Who left you there?" he asked. Clara could have lied. Habit rose first, old and automatic. She could say she had lost her way, that no one meant harm, that it was all a misunderstanding. Willow Creek had trained her to protect the comfort of people who never protected her. But the cloak on her shoulders was honest warmth, and the man beside her had stopped a royal procession because he heard one abandoned voice in the fog. She owed the truth at least that much. Evelyn Reed drove the carriage, Clara said softly. Mason Reed ordered it. Nathaniel did not answer, but the silence changed shape. It became colder, cleaner, like frost forming over steel. Clara's pulse quickened. "Please do not make a scene because of me." "Because of you?" His voice remained calm, but something beneath it had sharpened. "Clara, leaving anyone alone by a river at night is not a scene. It is a choice." The words settled into her with a force she was not prepared for. A choice, not an accident, not her fault, not a small cruelty she was supposed to swallow so everyone else could enjoy the festival. She pressed her lips together, afraid that if she spoke too soon, her voice would break. They walked on until torchlight began to flicker through the trees. The sounds of Willow Creek grew clearer. Laughter, fiddles, boots on wooden steps, the excited murmur of wolves waiting to impress northern guests. No one sounded worried. No one sounded like they had noticed an Omega was missing. Nathaniel stopped just outside the lantern glow. Clara could feel him turn toward her. "When we enter, do you want my arm, or do you want to walk on your own?" Such a simple question. Such a devastating one. Clara had been guided all her life, displayed when useful, hidden when inconvenient. Now choice stood before her in the shape of a stranger with a winter voice. She inhaled slowly, feeling the cloak brush her hands. "Your arm," she said. "Not because I cannot walk. I know. Because I want them to understand I did not come back alone." Nathaniel offered his arm at once. Clara placed her hand lightly on it, and together they stepped through the cedar gate. The loose chain tapped once in the wind, exactly as she remembered. Then the music stopped. The silence that followed Clara through the cedar gate was not empty. It was crowded with shock, with guilt, with the sudden rustle of people turning too quickly and pretending they had not been laughing a moment before. The Willow Creek yard glowed with lanterns strung from post to post, their warm light spilling over polished boots, pressed dresses, silver cups, and smiling faces that had gone still at the sight of Clara Whitmore walking in beneath a northern cloak. Her hand rested on Nathaniel's arm, light but steady. She could feel the strength there, not in the size of him alone, but in the absolute calm of a man who did not need to prove power by making noise. Around them, the music had stopped so completely that Clara could hear the fiddler lower his bow. Someone whispered her name. Someone else whispered his. The second whisper changed everything. King Nathaniel Frost, Alpha King of the North. The title moved through the yard like cold wind under a door. Clara's fingers almost slipped from his sleeve. Nathaniel. He had said only Nathaniel by the river, as if the crown were something he could set aside while helping a woman stand. Now she understood the weight of every pause, every careful word, every guard who had waited somewhere beyond the trees while their king followed her song alone. Mason Reed stood near the center platform, surrounded by elders and visiting nobles, his voice still shaped around a lie he had not finished telling. "She must have wandered off," he said, weaker now, as if repeating it could restore the world to the way it had been. Evelyn stood beside him, perfume sharp with panic, the tiny beads on her dress clicking as she shifted her weight. Clara did not look toward them because she could not, but she heard them both clearly. Mason's breathing had lost its smooth confidence. Evelyn's bracelet tapped against her cup again and again, a nervous rhythm Clara would have known anywhere. Nathaniel stopped in the center of the yard. He did not pull Clara forward. He let her choose the final step, and she took it. The cloak around her shoulders held back the cold, but nothing could soften the feeling of 100 eyes trying to decide whether she was still someone they were allowed to dismiss. Mason Reed, Nathaniel said. His voice carried without effort. You told this gathering Clara Whitmore left of her own will. Mason cleared his throat. Your Majesty, I only repeated what we believed. Belief is often what the guilty call convenience. A small sound passed through the crowd. Clara felt it like a ripple under her feet. Mason tried again. She is fragile, confused at times. It would not be the first time she misunderstood where she was meant to go. Clara's heart tightened, not from surprise, but from the familiar cruelty of being made unreliable in front of others. Nathaniel turned slightly toward her. Did you misunderstand? The question was for her, not about her. Clara lifted her chin. No, her voice was quiet, but the yard had become so still that it reached the edges. Evelyn told me she was taking me somewhere I could hear the music safely. Mason told her where to leave me. The river was close. The carriage did not wait. Evelyn made a soft protesting sound. Clara, you know I would never mean to frighten you. Clara turned her face toward the sound of that sweet, shaking voice. You said a blind Omega could not embarrass the pack if no one could find her. The words landed hard. No one spoke. No one laughed. Mason's polished certainty had nowhere left to stand. Nathaniel's hand covered Clara's for one brief second. Not possessive, not public display, only an anchor of warmth before he addressed the pack again. You left her in darkness and called it dignity. You hid her from honor and called it protection. You mistook gentleness for weakness because it never occurred to you that mercy might be stronger than pride. Clara felt the yard bow beneath the truth before any knees bent. For the first time in her life, the silence around her was not neglect. It was listening. The truth did not shout when it entered the Willow Creek yard. It settled, quiet and undeniable, into every space where excuses had once lived. Clara stood beside Nathaniel with the northern cloak warm around her shoulders, listening to the way people shifted their weight, the way cups lowered, the way Mason's confidence turned brittle under the lantern light. She could not see their faces, but she did not need sight to know the room of the world had changed. For years, Willow Creek had spoken around her, over her, through her, as if blindness had made her presence smaller. Now every breath waited for what she might say next. That frightened her more than the river had. Fear at the river had been simple. Cold. Darkness. Water. This was different. This was the terror of being seen after a lifetime of being hidden. Mason recovered first, because men like him often mistook quick speech for truth. Your Majesty, with respect, this is an emotional misunderstanding. Clara has always been sensitive. Her condition makes certain situations difficult for her. Clara felt the old trap open at her feet. Not a direct insult. Not a raised hand. Something smoother. A sentence dressed like concern, designed to make her sound unreliable without looking cruel. Evelyn gave a soft sniffle nearby, as if she were the one who had been left alone. We only wanted to spare her the crowd, she whispered. The festival can be overwhelming. Nathaniel did not answer immediately. Clara felt him turn his head toward her, giving her the choice again, the space again, the respect again. He could have silenced them with one royal word. Instead, he let her decide whether she wanted to be defended or heard. Clara closed her fingers lightly around the edge of the cloak. The festival was never what overwhelmed me, she said. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied as the yard leaned closer. It was being told that my existence made other people uncomfortable. It was hearing doors close before I reached them. It was learning every hallway by sound because no one thought to leave a chair where it belonged. It was being guided by the arm and never asked where I wanted to go. Somewhere near the back, an older woman drew in a shaking breath. Clara kept going before courage could leave her. Tonight, I was not spared. I was removed. The words were not loud, but they rang clearer than any accusation. Mason's polished shoes scraped the wooden platform. This is absurd. She is twisting kindness into offense. A child in the crowd began to cry then, not loudly, just a small frightened sound that broke through the heavy air. Clara turned instinctively toward it. The child was near the left side of the yard, close to the musicians, maybe 6 or 7 years old from the pitch of the breath. Adults murmured, embarrassed by the interruption, but Clara heard the fear underneath. Too many tense voices. Too much pressure. Too many powerful wolves standing too still. Without thinking, Clara let go of Nathaniel's arm and stepped toward the sound. Someone gasped, perhaps afraid she would stumble, but Nathaniel did not stop her. He moved only half a step behind, close enough to catch, far enough to trust. Clara lowered herself carefully to one knee on the cold ground. "It is all right," she said softly. "I hear you." The child's crying hitched. Clara began to hum the same lullaby she had sung beside the river, the one that had carried her name through mist and found a king on a northern road. The melody moved gently through the yard, simple and warm, curling around fear the way hands cup a candle against the wind. The child quieted first. Then the musicians lowered their instruments completely. Then even the torches seemed to burn softer. Clara did not know that Nathaniel's silver ring had begun to glow. She did not know that the ancient crest above the cedar gate, carved so long ago no one remembered its purpose, had answered with a pale blue light. But she heard the elders fall to their knees one by one, the soft thud of reverence against frozen earth. Lady Maren Frost, the northern advisor who had arrived with the delegation, spoke from the edge of the yard, her voice hushed with awe. Moonbound voice. Clara's song faltered. Nathaniel stepped beside her, and this time his hand found hers with careful certainty. The glow brightened for one breath, warm against her skin, and the wolf inside Clara lifted its head fully, no longer fragile, no longer ashamed. Mason whispered, "Impossible." Nathaniel's reply was quiet, but every soul in Willow Creek heard it. No, forgotten is not the same as impossible. The glow from Nathaniel's ring faded slowly, like moonlight sinking back into silver, but the silence it left behind was brighter than any lantern in the yard. Clara remained kneeling near the child, her hand still resting in Nathaniel's, her own breath unsteady in a way she could not hide. Moonbound voice. The words moved through her like a language she had known before birth and forgotten beneath years of being told she was less. She did not fully understand what it meant, only that the elders were no longer whispering about her blindness, her rank, or the embarrassment she might have caused. They were quiet because they had heard her, truly heard her. Lady Maren Frost stepped forward, her gown brushing the frozen grass. Her voice was careful now, stripped of courtly pride. "Your Majesty, the old records say the moonbound voice appears only when the North has lost its way. It does not belong to entertainers or ornaments. It belongs to a soul able to calm what power alone cannot govern." Clara felt the entire pack listen harder. Mason made a small sound of disbelief, but no one turned toward him. Evelyn's bracelet had stopped tapping. Nathaniel helped Clara rise, and though his hand was steady, she sensed something changed in him too. His heartbeat, the one she had heard soften beside the river, now moved with a deeper rhythm, as if some guarded part of him had finally answered a call it had resisted for years. "Then Willow Creek nearly abandoned what the North was meant to find," he said. Mason's voice cut in, thin with desperation. "Your Majesty, surely one song does not erase protocol. She is still an Omega. She has no training, no court standing, no sight to navigate royal halls." Clara waited for the words to hurt the way they always had. They touched old bruises, yes, but they did not enter as deeply. Not with the child calm behind her. Not with the cedar gate glowing faintly above. Not with Nathaniel standing beside her, as if her place there did not require apology. "I have navigated halls full of people who moved obstacles into my path and called it my weakness when I stumbled," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "If the North has better halls, I can learn them. If it does not, perhaps it should." A breath, almost a gasp, moved through the crowd. Then, from somewhere near the musicians, the child's mother whispered, "She is right." Another voice followed, older and rougher. "She always knew when the little ones were scared. She sang for my mother when fever took her sleep," someone else said. The truth began to rise not as a wave, but as small lights appearing one by one. Stories Clara had never known people remembered. Small kindnesses she had given without expecting them to matter. A cup of water left by a sickbed. A song through a door. A hand reaching for a frightened child in a noisy room. Mason tried to speak again, but this time the pack's own murmurs covered him. Nathaniel waited until the voices settled. "Mason Reed and Evelyn Reed will answer to Willow Creek's elders, and to the northern delegation for abandoning a member of their pack and misleading the crown," he said. There was no cruelty in his tone, only finality. "Their titles will not protect them from the truth." Clara lowered her head, not in victory, but in release. She had not wanted punishment as much as she had wanted someone to stop calling harm kindness. Nathaniel turned toward her, and when he spoke again, his voice softened enough that it felt meant for her first and the crowd second. "Clara Whitmore, the North owes you safe passage, shelter, and honor. Come with me to Frost Hall. Not because you sang for a king, and not because an old sign answered you. Come because no one should have to earn the right to be treated as whole." Clara tightened her fingers around the edge of his cloak. Frost Hall. The name sounded like high towers, winter bells, and impossible distance. It sounded frightening. It sounded free. "Will I have a choice once I am there?" she asked. The yard went still again. Nathaniel answered without hesitation. "You will have more choices there than you were ever given here." Clara listened to the river far beyond the trees, still moving through darkness, still carrying the song that had changed everything. Then she turned her face toward Nathaniel's voice and gave the smallest nod. "Then I will go north." The cedar gate above them gave one last pale shimmer, and for the first time, Willow Creek bowed not to hide her, not to pity her, but to let her pass. The road to Frost Hall began before dawn, when Willow Creek was still half asleep and the lanterns from the festival had burned down to soft amber dots in the mist. Clara stood beside the northern carriage with Nathaniel's cloak around her shoulders, listening to the sounds of departure. Horses shifting in harness, guards checking leather straps, Lady Marin giving quiet instructions, trunks being lifted with careful hands instead of shoved aside like burdens. No one from Willow Creek tried to stop her. A few came to say goodbye, but their words arrived too late and too small, like candles lit after sunrise. Clara accepted them gently because bitterness felt heavier than anything she wanted to carry north. When the carriage door opened, Nathaniel did not lift her in or guide her without warning. He described the step, the height of the seat, the handle to her right, and waited while she found each one herself. That simple patience nearly undid her. It was not grand enough for songs, not dramatic enough for the stories people told about kings, but to Clara it felt like a door opening in a house that had always locked her out. The journey stretched across miles of pine forest and pale winter fields. Clara could not see the mountains growing larger, but she felt the air change as they climbed. It became thinner, cleaner, filled with the scent of snow and cedar smoke. Every few miles, Nathaniel named what passed beyond the carriage window, without making her feel like a child. "A frozen creek on the left," he said once. 3 deer near the ridge. A watchtower ahead, black stone, 2 banners. Clara listened, building the north inside her mind from sound, scent, and his steady voice. By midday, the road grew rough, and the carriage jolted over a rut. Clara's hand found the seat edge, but Nathaniel's hand moved near hers, hovering rather than taking. "May I?" he asked. Clara smiled before she could stop herself. "You ask that often. People should have asked you more." The words were quiet, but they filled the carriage more completely than warmth from the travel stones at their feet. Clara turned her face toward him. "Do you always speak so carefully?" "No," a pause. "With you, I am trying to." Something inside her softened and trembled at once. She had expected a cold king because that was what the stories promised. She had not expected a man who measured his strength by how safely someone else could stand beside it. Near sunset, the carriage stopped at the base of a vast stone bridge. Clara heard water far below, not the hurried river that had nearly become her prison, but a deep northern current moving under ice. Bells began to ring in the distance, low and silver, answering one another across the valley. Frost Hall. She knew before anyone said it. The sound was too large to belong anywhere else. Nathaniel stepped down first, then offered his arm. Clara took it, and together they crossed the bridge on foot because he said the first entrance to Frost Hall should not be rushed. The wind lifted her hair, cold and bright against her cheeks. Ahead, gates opened with a groan of ancient hinges, and hundreds of voices fell silent. Clara heard the hush of people bowing, the rustle of cloaks, the soft gasp of a child who had expected a legend and found a woman holding the king's arm. Her fingers tightened once. Nathaniel leaned closer, his voice low enough for her alone. "You are not here to prove you deserve the North. The North will prove it deserves you." Clara breathed in the scent of snow, stone, and distant hearth fires. Then she stepped through the gates beside him, not hidden behind anyone, not led away from the light, but welcomed into a kingdom that had stopped to listen before it ever asked her to sing. The first night inside Frost Hall did not feel like sleep. It felt like standing at the center of a song too old for words. Clara lay in a guest chamber warmed by a quiet hearth, listening to the unfamiliar kindness of the room. The soft crackle of cedar logs, the steady drip of melting snow beyond the window, the careful footsteps of a servant leaving tea outside her door without entering uninvited. Everything had been described to her before she touched it. The bed stood 12 steps from the door. The washstand was to the left. A woven bell cord hung beside the hearth, low enough for her hand. Someone had moved the sharp-edged table away from the walking path without making her ask. These were small things, invisible things, but Clara felt them as deeply as if the walls themselves had learned respect. At dawn, Lady Marin came to bring her to the Hall of Echoes, where the northern elders waited to understand the moonbound voice. Clara expected judgment. She had heard enough noble voices in Willow Creek to know how polished doubt could sound. But Frost Hall was different from the moment she entered. The chamber was built for sound. Every step returned softly from the stone. Every breath carried upward into a ceiling shaped like a winter shell. Nathaniel stood near the center, silent until Clara reached him, then said, "There are 8 elders present, seated in a half-circle 10 feet ahead. Lady Marin is on your right. I am on your left. No one will touch you without asking." The elders murmured, not in offense, but in understanding. Clara's throat tightened. She had not known safety could be made from information. Lord Alden, the eldest voice in the room, spoke with careful gravity. "Miss Whitmore, we do not ask you to perform. We ask only what you are willing to share." Clara folded her hands. "I do not know how the gift works." "Then tell us how it feels." She listened inward, searching for words. "Like hearing pain before it becomes a sound," she said slowly. "Like there is a room inside every person, and sometimes a door is left open. When I sing, I do not push the fear away. I sit beside it until it remembers it is not alone." No one spoke for several heartbeats. Then Nathaniel's ring gave a faint, answering warmth beside her. Clara heard him inhale, controlled but not untouched. Lady Marin stepped closer. "Your Majesty, the old records say the gift responds most strongly to the sovereign's true unrest." The chamber shifted around that sentence. Nathaniel became very still. Clara turned slightly toward him, sensing not anger, but a loneliness so disciplined it had almost become part of the stone. She understood then why her song had reached him on the road. It had not called to his power. It had called to the part of him that power had buried. "I do not want to expose him," Clara said quietly. The elders fell silent. Nathaniel's voice came softer than she expected. "You did not." Clara faced the half-circle again. "Then I will sing, but not to prove I am useful. I will sing because some rooms should not stay locked forever." Her melody rose gently into the Hall of Echoes, the same lullaby from the river, but fuller now, steadier, no longer a thread thrown into darkness. The stones carried it upward. The silver crest above the chamber door warmed with pale light. And beside her, the Alpha King of the North bowed his head, not in weakness, but in release. By sunset, the Hall of Echoes had emptied, but the song Clara left behind seemed to remain in the stone. It followed her through Frost Hall in the hush of servants speaking more gently, in the careful rhythm of guards stepping aside before she reached them, in the distant bells that rang once across the valley, as if the north itself had exhaled. Word had already traveled from the elders to the lower halls, from the lower halls to the courtyard, from the courtyard to the winter villages beyond the bridge. The blind Omega from Willow Creek had sung before the king, and the old crest had answered. Clara did not know how to carry such a story when she had spent her life trying not to take up too much space. Nathaniel found her near the western balcony, where the doors had been opened just enough to let in the sound of falling snow. She knew him by his footsteps now, measured and quiet, and by the way the air seemed to steady before he spoke. "May I join you?" he asked. Clara smiled faintly. "You are the king. Is there any place in Frost Hall you must ask to enter?" "Beside you," he said. "Yes." The words warmed her more than the hearths inside. He stood at her side without touching, close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the cold evening air. Below them, The courtyard gathered with people holding lanterns. No festival music, no forced display, only hundreds of small flames waiting in respectful silence. "They came for you," Nathaniel said. Clara's fingers tightened around the balcony rail. "For the gift. For the woman who carries it." She turned her face toward him, hearing something in his voice that had not been there by the river. Not command, not restraint. Hope, perhaps, though he wore it carefully. "What happens now?" she asked. Nathaniel was silent long enough that she heard snow touch the stone. "Now the North learns to listen. Doorways will be marked. Halls will be kept clear. The schools will teach children that strength has more than one shape. Willow Creek will answer for what it hid, but more importantly, no pack under my crown will be allowed to hide someone like you again." Clara swallowed against the ache in her throat. "And me?" His answer came softer. "You choose." The word opened inside her like a window. Choose. Stay or leave. Sing or remain silent. Stand near him or step away. No one had ever given her freedom without trying to shape it first. Below, the lanterns lifted one by one as the crowd sensed their presence. A child's voice called her name, not cruelly, not curiously, but with bright recognition. Clara breathed in the scent of snow, cedar smoke, and the cloak still resting around her shoulders. "I will stay for now," she said. "Not because destiny commands me, because I want to see what a kingdom can become when it stops looking away." Nathaniel's breath moved quietly beside her, almost a laugh, almost relief. "Then I will build that kingdom worthy of your song." Clara reached out, and this time she found his hand without waiting for him to offer it. His fingers closed around hers carefully, as if trust were something sacred enough to hold gently. In the courtyard below, the people bowed their heads. Clara could not see the lanterns, but she felt their warmth rising through the winter air, hundreds of small lights answering a girl who had once sung alone beside a river. She thought of Willow Creek, of the carriage wheels fading into mud, of the cold water whispering too close to her feet. She thought of the stranger who had heard her before he knew her worth, and of the king who had asked before touching, listened before judging, and stood beside her without making her smaller. For the first time, the darkness around Clara did not feel like abandonment. It felt like a sky wide enough to hold every unseen star. And as snow fell over Frost Hall, softening towers and roads and old sorrow alike, Clara Whitmore began to sing again, not to survive the night, not to call for rescue, but to bless the place where her voice had finally been welcomed home.